Hello and good evening. So in this video, I want to go over the updates to the tournament rules as well as the rules document, the game rules document that were made just a couple weeks ago. Pretty good to get this in there ahead of the upcoming RLE for people who might have missed something, don't want to get surprised by any processes or anything like that. So both documents received a bunch of updates. I'm not going to read every single line aloud or anything like that, so hopefully I don't glaze over anything that shouldn't be glazed over. If you do think I missed something that actually matters, then, put it in the comments below. And so, yeah, there's two documents. In case you don't know, there's the tournament rules document that is, tournament procedures, things that count as slow play, things that are violations of, misconduct, things like that, how tournaments should be structured, how many rounds there should be, things like that. And then there's the actual game rules document that is supposed to describe, once you're in the game and playing, what are the rules, how do cards interact and that sort of thing. And there's updates to the game rules pretty much every set, both to cover new cards and also to close gaps. It's a pretty complicated game. There's kind of always some interaction or other that's like, oh, that could be worded better in the rules or whatnot, or hey, this thing's not really defined and probably should be. So there's going to be some of those. The tournament rules change on a less regular basis. I can't say I've been keeping track of the exact change log, but they do change from time to time, and usually they'll post when something does. Yes, without further ado, the way this works is they will highlight anything that was changed for this version in red text. And it's going to be a mix of stuff that's just kind of technicalities that, just formalities and stuff that matters. So first and foremost here, we have some lines about, if you register for an event, you're giving permission that they can use you in their videos. They can use, you in pictures and whatnot. They might ask you to submit a deck list digitally. That's sort of formally in here now. Players can provide a digital copy of their deck list. Clarifying that they will let you use a different sleeve for your starting character or also for your sideboard if you're trying to keep cards distinguished. You may also put, your starting character in a hard case if you want to play with your Chrome Rare starting character or something. You might want to do that. So that's all fine. They're getting a bunch of questions about that. Signed cards also, similarly fine. I'm kind of surprised this wasn't in here already, but people kind of already knew this. As long as it doesn't mess with the card text or otherwise mark the cards, then, having a signed card or something like that is perfectly fine. There's some additions to note-taking that kind of matter a little bit, so possibly in a response to an incident at the HLC, they are clarifying that while there's a bunch of stuff that's okay to take notes on, stuff like, remembering what attacks went into momentum, what did your opponent reveal from their hand, stuff like that, so you're not just turning something into a pure memory game. But extreme versions where you're writing down every single card that goes into your opponent's discard pile to try to keep track of what their deck list is after they cycle is not really allowed, and you're not also allowed to have notes that are telling you how to play the game, right? You're not allowed to have a big dumb post-it note, I guess, right in front of you on your deck box saying don't forget to first form, that anything like that. So there's a big block of red text here in a few different sections. Most of this is pretty straightforward though, actually. One's about board representation of don't hide stuff. It's not really okay to have a big stack of face downs and to try to be dodgy about how many cards are in it. Players can ask, how many cards are in your deck or something at any time, so it's not doing it too much. You shouldn't try to deliberately have a playmat and card sleeves that match colors so that you can camouflage cards. It's not kind of obvious stuff. The match procedures is just explaining how a best-of-3 match works for the most part. There is one notable thing in here. They are codifying that after sideboarding, you do have to tell your opponent how many cards you sided. And you're also not supposed to go digging into your sideboard without... If you go into your sideboard, you're supposed to sideboard, right? You're not supposed to waste time going to your sideboard to ultimately side nothing. I'm not sure how enforceable that is. Obviously, people reach for their sideboard and then think about what they want to do. But that is, technically a rule. You can't slow play your opponent in that manner. But most important thing, you have to tell your opponent how many cards you sided. This is to probably, I don't know why they do these things, but generally the justification for this rule, it's been in and out of tournament rules at different points in time during the game's history, but the idea is that it just makes it so that players don't have an incentive to play a cup game with put your entire sideboard into your deck and then go through and then find the cards that you don't want, and then you only actually sided one card, but you didn't want your opponent to know that. So it wastes a lot of time trying to camouflage this, and technically there's good reason to do so, especially with some things we'll talk about later. So they're saying when you sideboard, you have to tell people how many cards you sided, just so that there's not a lot of shenanigans around people doing their best to try to mask what they're doing. Top cut match procedure, kind of just a repeat of all the same things, except there's no time limit, and that the higher seed gets to decide who goes first. Let's see, what's next down here? There's a section in the tournament organizer role. The tournament organizer is now also supposed to make sure that events are using an official sanctioned format. They don't want people running events with house rules now. They're worried about people showing up from somewhere else. Someone saw the game online, played with their friend, decided I'm going to come to a tournament, and then turns out that local tournament has some house rules about time limits or local bans or things like that. They want you to get Jasco's approval before you do that, and they want to make sure that anything you do like that is really clearly communicated. Affects some groups. I'm not really sure if this has actually happened anywhere, but maybe they're getting out of it, or they've seen it happen in other card games. Let's see. Types of tournaments. So this is probably an alteration. I don't remember exactly what all this said before, but they are explaining sealed draft and teams. I believe this is probably to cover for the inclusion of a character card in the packs now. Other than that, the rules for sealed and draft haven't really changed. There's a little paragraph here saying that if you have to leave the draft midway or you just want to, you can just take your packs and go home pretty much. And the draft will just continue. They'll pass as if you weren't there pretty much. There is a codification of teams. I'm not sure if this was the way this is before, but this is the old school codification of teams, where if you were in Team Constructed, you cannot have more than 2 play sets, 8 copies of a card, unless I guess it's Ectoplasm clones. You can't have more than 2 play sets of a card across your 3 team members. So there's a little bit of, you can't just play 3 life decks. It very rarely comes up, but so long as your team is playing on 3 different symbols, it's very hard for this to actually happen in practice. And additionally, you can't have the same character appear in, more than one of your decks. Yeah, hopefully this will stop people from running team side events and then just deciding at the last minute for whatever reason that they're just not going to enforce any of this stuff. Combined with the note above about the tournament organizers enforcing the existing rules. In theory, if someone puts a teams event on their schedule, it should be this. I know there's been a lot of irritation about people getting really excited about teams events and thinking about their decks and doing their deck building, and then they face a team that's just 3x public enemy number 1 because the TO is just letting that fly. So hopefully we see less of that going forward. Not necessarily holding my breath. I have some additions to the time ending procedure. Just clarifying, they put this rule in sort of as an announcement. They put it into the document now. If time and overtime is called, you finish out the current form. There's no haha, we're not at the block step yet, therefore this lethal attack doesn't kill me, which is a silly thing that actually happened in an online event at one point. And nestled in here, probably one of the most impactful things, top cut deck lists are going to be made public, supposedly following the end of Swiss rounds. We will see how long following the end is, I guess starting on Saturday. And those deck lists are viewable throughout the remainder of the tournament. I'm guessing not mid-match. Something I did miss about the top cut procedures up above is that they're going to give people 3 minutes before their match to review the other players' deck lists in case they hadn't seen them, having been shown off after Swiss or something like that. But a little unclear exactly viewable throughout the remainder of the tournament means. I'm assuming they're not going to want you sitting with a paper copy of your opponent's deck list during the match, or else why give you 3 minutes to review it. But that is a thing they want to do. They want to make it so that there's no such thing as a scouting advantage where, I have 10 friends who are willing to tell me details about this deck that they faced, and someone who's just not super well connected to the community is going in blind, right? It's kind of a awkward situation, and you get people who feel like they were punished for being on stream, that sort of thing. So They want to start doing that. Let's see what we have here. Simultaneous game loss. If you cause both players to die at the same time, you lose. They just want to cut that off. There's some effects like Cinder Convention that makes both players lose health at the same time, and they don't want those situations to become draws, so they put a rule in here that says if that happens, the player who caused it loses. This is the overtime current form rule again, and I think that's probably it for these. A lot of stuff about infractions here, and yeah, just some notes about where to find things, some links. Alright, so that covers the updates to the tournament floor rules. The biggest things in here are the top cut deck lists being public overnight and then viewable before the match. And then hopefully the sealed rules pan out and people actually use them and that gets enforced. And sideboarding. When you sideboard in the RLE, make sure you tell your opponent how many cards you sided. If your opponent asks you, you have to tell them. I don't think there's going to be like a huge penalty if you forget. Don't try to rule shock your opponent. Be like, they didn't tell me how many cards they sided, and it's turn 3, and you call the judge, and you're gonna get hit by the judge for angle shooting for that. But that is information that you are supposed to be giving out. So now go on to the game rules themselves. Again, same thing. Changes are in red text. Sometimes these are replacements of text that used to be there. Sometimes this is new text. Some of it's going to be random formalities, some of it's going to matter. We just go through in order. They have links to all the sections in here, even with some of these red highlighted. So the first thing we have in here, this is 2 columns, so when you're reading this, remember there's left column, right column, then the left column of the next page. It's almost meant to be read like left to right, like to print it out instead of scroll through it like this, but anyway. The first change we have in here is the bit that is allowing you to play actions from other zones if you're using one of these Yakuza abilities that just let you play some card from a different zone. They have added a rule in there that allows you to do actions like that, so long as you're doing all the other rules around actions, right? You're not allowed to play an enhanced action as a form all of a sudden or anything like that. You still need to pay the cost, etc., etc. But we knew that was going to happen, so that is in there. Just a clarification, counts or refers to your assets. Just a cleanup of some rules technicalities. There are people that will pick out, hey, technically, if you follow the rules, there's no rule about XYZ, and therefore this. There's a bunch of things like that. Speaking of which, there's a bunch of stuff in here cleaning up the definitions of this attack and your rival's attack. So the way it was before is that the your attack definition kind of referred back to the this attack definition, and the this attack definition had an extra call out for some, situational stuff, a handful of cards that could be read different ways, and then if you played the your attack to that, it got kind of messy, but in practice, this doesn't change anything. All the cards work exactly the way you would expect them to when you read them. This is just for, covering up rules lawyer shenanigans type of stuff. In the blocking section, we have an attack can only have 1 block status, and if a block status changes after being determined, you don't get to re-trigger all your you just block triggers. So this is for effects like Unbreakable, and I believe it's Flying Scissor Kick is the name of the Mirio card that does this. There might be another one where after you've already blocked an attack, you are then changing it to become, count as being completely blocked. What this is saying is that, first of all, attacks are not going to be partially and completely blocked at the same time, which sounds obvious, but you should put it in the rules, right? And also, when you do this, you do not get to fire off a bunch of stuff that triggers upon completely blocking. Right, so you partially block an attack, that is what happened. You can respond to blocking an attack at that time, you can respond to partially blocking the attack, the opponent can Kirishima's assistance you, all of that stuff. And if the partial block gets changed to count as a complete block, you do not now get to respond to after you completely block triggers. Because you never completely blocked it, you partial blocked it and then changed what that counted as, right? So it's just saying there's no double triggering here. There's one trigger. You are still in the you just partial blocked response window. In particular, your opponent can still Kirishima's assistance you, even after you activate one of these effects, and so on. All right, down here. Copying another card. So we now have, this guy's going to be the reason for a lot of the rules in here. So all your sets know. Copies entire cards, and this is what does that mean, right? It should be in the rulebook. It says it copies the entire card. It copies everything that counts as a card property. Its name, its card type, its block modifier, its abilities. Technically not its artist, because its artist isn't game text, but anything that's on the card that can matter to the game in any way is copied. Let's see. We have in deadlock in here. We just have codifying, like at deadlock or in deadlock is a thing you see on card text that wasn't necessarily in the rulebook before, so that's in there now. Some stuff around damage and deals damage, about negative damage and no damage. Nothing is actually changing here. They're just cleaning up some wording that was opening the door to people to make some arguments about zero damage, float combos, and muscle rushes and electric jolts and things like that. That, you know, those, they all have this text that if they're completely blocked, they still deal 1 damage. And the way the rules read before, you could argue that if you completely blocked a 0 damage electric jolt, then it should still deal 0 damage, because the way the rules were letting it, that wasn't the point of those rules, not what they were meant to do. So you should just reframe to get around those arguments and to, you know, make it pretty clear that, you know, definitely in the rules that that's what's happening. We have a rule here that says Echo on a face down card cannot be played. Toy sets no again. There was a similar rule like this for the old multiple ability. It's the same idea. Don't even know what would happen if you could play an Echo ability in face, but you just can't do it. Don't even worry about it's not allowed. Just straight up, no. Face down attacks. So this is similar to copying card. You can now have attacks that are face down. A bunch of bullet points about this. Some of it is, a lot of this is just clarification that, you know, this isn't a technical rules document the same way the old LGR was, so it's not a bare minimum necessary lines of text thing. They do put stuff in here just to be more clear, which sometimes causes duplication issues and things like that, but it also makes it easier to read. So face down attacks that deal damage still go to momentum during the end phase because they are attacks, and you copied everything about the card, including its card type. It is an attack. It is still an attack at the end of the turn. It dealt damage, goes to the momentum. If it becomes if it used to be an attack and then gets turned face down and it's not an attack anymore, it does not go to momentum because it's not an attack. Right? So it's just saying if you had a face down attack, it was an attack while it was face down, right? It copied the card type attack and it is still an attack at the end of the turn, it's going to the momentum. Same thing, it's an attack. It copied the card type of attack, it is an attack in your card pool, anything that counts attacks in your card pool. There you go. Face down attack, if you need its printed stuff, it is a 0 printed speed, 0 printed damage, and its printed zone is mid, its printed block is mid. Anything that refers to that. There's some open questions about whether or not they want to change this to make this not work with combo, because I believe as this is ruled, you could do combo mid attack off of a face down attack right now. Check the head judge before you do anything relying on that if you're playing Toyo Tsuno in the upcoming event. But the way the old LGR worked, it was arranged in such a way that you could not combo mid attack off of face down attacks, but you could do other stuff. You could do that wasn't combo, that talked about printed values if it wasn't talking about the zone. So, you know, there was some inconsistency there. We're not sure if Jask was going to try to reintroduce that inconsistency to make it the same way it always was, or just stick with what this is. And when a card played face down as an attack, it starts with all the copied values in its starting current state, which is just it avoids really technical weird stuff happening. Flash, we have a call out on Flash. If a card gets flashed during the enhanced step ends. This is for Phantom Threat, and for anything else that might give an attack a keyword in the middle of the enhanced step. The enhanced step ends, right? Card gains flash, enhanced step. Obviously, you still finish any, response triggers or whatnot, but then you move to the block step. Foundation is the same thing as assets, counts or refers to your foundations. Some card will just say, like, hey, destroy one of your foundations. Like, well, I'll destroy one in my card pool. No. It means one's in your stage, right? That's just covering anybody making silly arguments about that. Health, maximum health. This is an edgy rule. If your current health ends up being more than your maximum health, your current health goes down. This is also for Fat Gum. If for whatever reason your current health is more than what your maximum is, your health will go down to that number. Kind of obviously, but it needs to be in the rules. In its name, seemingly wasn't defined before, now it is. As we probably already know, anything that's looking for a word in another card's name is looking for exactly that word. Considering that we now have a card that looks for the word red in another card's name, that could be in a lot of names if we only took the partial word, and be pretty funny. Measured violence, for instance, is called out here. But yeah, if it says is this word in another card's name, it needs to be exactly that word. Keyword rating. This is an old rule that is now in here that probably should have been put in here early, but in any event, if an effect modifies a card's keyword rating, you have a bunch of instances of it. Like you can have a card that has stun 3 times technically. If it gains to a stun rating, you pick one of those instances and increase that one instance. So this is, let's see, like a Bakugo 2 rule, right? It'd be relevant for him in some cases. Negative numbers, this is just the Electric Jolt float combo thing just repeated down here because rules about that are in here a couple times. Down in the P's. Progressive difficulty. Progressive difficulty was previously not defined in the rules, and it was kind of, it might have been referred to a couple times. These rules, the initial version of these rules probably tried not to mention it because it's kind of a clunky phrasing that we don't really like, but yeah, they decided, all right, well, we need to put progressive difficulty words. We're putting it on card text. We refer to it all the time. It should be in the rules. So now, playing a card used to have a bunch of text down here. Now it just says progressive difficulty. Same here. Also a rule, if you're playing a card from your card pool, the card you are playing does not count towards its own progressive difficulty, which is a question that people could have asked. And people were never really playing it that way, but technically you kind of need a rule that says that that's what's going on. This is the, printed values of face down cards. Because we can have face down attacks now, we need to cover for attack zones, and probably should have covered for block zones regardless anyway. Let's see. Progressive difficulty. Yeah, this is the definition of progressive difficulty. Sorry, I'm like side train of thoughting myself on this printed thing up here. But yeah. What else do we have here? Search. So we have codified, there wasn't really any rules about exactly what it means to search. Now it's saying what it means to search. And it's all the obvious things. If you're searching for a card and the thing asks you to find a specific type of card, you have to reveal what you searched for, right? If it says search your deck for an attack, you have to show your opponent that you did in fact grab an attack. And in a lot of cases, that card's going to be public anyway because you're putting it into your discard pile, into your card pool or something like that. If you are doing a search effect and you don't find a card that matches the thing you need, you do not need to reveal your deck to your opponent and prove that you couldn't do it. And of course, if you search your deck for any reason, you always shuffle it afterwards. I don't know if they always put that. Sometimes they'll put that text on cards for clarity, but this is a rule. If a card forgets to say shuffle afterwards, you still have to shuffle your deck. This is more of this attack stuff from before. And I think that is it. Alright, so those are all of the changes to the rules that we have going on. I hope that wasn't too quick or too glossed over for people. I try not to take too much time. If you think I missed anything, put it in the comments. If you have any questions, that sort of stuff. I'm not, the official judge or a head judge for anything or anything like that. I might get wrangled into line judging at the Rochester RLE, but that's about it. Yeah. But yeah, I'm generally pretty good with the rules, so if you have any questions you can ask in there. Just, caveat, I'm not the official judge at whatever event you're going to, probably. So, yeah, and, let me know if this helped. Let me know if you want me to do this for future sets. It can be kind of easy, they just post the rules at some point and say, here are the rules, and sometimes they put some bullet points about what changed, and those aren't always complete bullet points either, so I thought it'd be a good idea to do something like this, just in case people miss something. Yeah. But, I know we had a little bit of news day before yesterday. I'll probably wait until after the RLE to cover anything that they do there to do my next news video. So yeah, I will see you then, and for everyone playing in the webcam RLE, have fun and good luck. Alright, have a good night.